People dropping out. You won't even know. You won't know.
All right, guys.
He just told his boyfriend bye.
Another good way to make money.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So according to the Organ Transplant Foundation, approximately 114,000 people are on the waiting list for an organ transplant, and it's estimated that about 20 people on that list die every day while they're waiting for a suitable organ. And just one deceased donor has the ability to save up to 8 lives. But dying isn't the only way to donate an organ. Approximately 6,000 living donations occur every year, and 1 in 4 of those are from people that aren't even biologically related to that patient. And so organ transplantation is the removing of a deceased organ from an unhealthy patient and the replacement with a healthy working organ from a donor. And it's possible to register to be a donor through the DMV or to fill out a living will. And that means that if you are to die in an accident, that your organs could potentially be used to save lives. And it's also important for donors to discuss their decisions with their families, as uninformed families have the power to halt the process if they don't want that. You go to the next slide. And so there are multiple types of organ donation, and each can be life-changing for the recipient. So according to Mayo Clinic, there are 7 categories that these fit into. The first category is liver transplants, and these are often for things such as hepatitis, end-stage liver disease, liver-specific genetic diseases, tumors, and general liver failure. And then the second category is lung transplants. These are often for cystic fibrosis, pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary fibrosis, and other genetic diseases. And there's also, lung transplants often occur if the patient has a life expectancy of 1 to 2 years. And then there's also heart transplants, which occur for congestive heart failure, birth defects, dilated cardiomyopathy, and other coronary diseases. And there's also kidney transplants, which are for end-stage kidney disease, diabetes, polycystic kidneys, uncontrolled high blood pressure. And then there's also pancreas transplants, which occur for type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And then there's also small intestine transplants, which are for advanced intestinal diseases, ischemia, Crohn's disease, trauma, motility disorder, and tumors. And then the last type of transplant is like the broadest category. That's just tissue donations, which include skin, blood vessels, corneas, tendons, veins, bones, and heart valves. But yeah, then there's also 2 ways to donate an organ. There's either living donation, which would be donating an organ while that person's still alive, but that's limited to either livers or kidneys. And then, of course, there's a deceased donation where the donor would be brain dead. And then next slide, please. And then the process of matching from a donor to a recipient on the transplant list is not simple. According to organdonor.gov, the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network operates the national database of all patients in the U.S. waiting for a transplant, and the computer system matches the donor's organs to potential recipients. And this takes factors such as blood types, body size, the severity of the patient's medical condition, distance between the donor and recipient's hospital, the patient's waiting time, and whether the patient is available and has been contacted. Next slide, please. And so to be slightly more specific in reference to certain organs, heart patients are first assigned an urgency code, but patients that are closer to the donor's hospital are more likely to receive that organ because hearts can only survive outside the body for 4 to 6 hours. And then the same thing with lungs. It also takes into account the likelihood of prolonged survival. And then the size of rib cages are also taken into account because whenever the organs are dead, the chest cavity tends to shrink up. So they have to find a pair of lungs that would fit in there. And yeah, the person with the highest score is offered the organ first. And livers can survive outside the body for 12 to 15 hours. And then with kidneys, blood type, the length of the time on the list, body sizes, and whether the patient is a child is taken into account. And kidneys can stay outside the body for 24 to 48 hours. And then with pancreas transplants, blood type and the length of time on the list are taken into consideration. And these transplants are often performed at the same time as a kidney transplant. And in intestine transplants, the donor is usually considered smaller than the recipient again because the abdominal cavity shrinks. And they also take into account the risk for diseases after the transplant. Next slide, please. And so the demand for organ transplants is great, with almost 114,000 people on the waiting list and many limitations on which patients can receive certain organs. It's important that the number of potential donors grows to fulfill that need, and understanding and addressing people's concerns is the best way to help people make a decision on whether to be a donor or not. And then another way to improve that was stated by Marcel Mauss, who said that reciprocity was the key to understanding and building social relations around gift giving in societies. So that means that if people think about organ donation in a gift giving capacity, then it'll be a much easier choice. So there are many reasons why people have concerns surrounding organ donation. So according to a study by Freya Sakala, people's openness to organ donation increased when they were presented to narratives of organ donation that contained relative information to explain them. And so this helps to address specific fears and avoid misinformation about certain topics. An example of this would be having a doctor explain a story of a successful organ transplant and improve lives of the patients after. So another reason why people dislike the idea of becoming a donor is because they must face their own mortality, which is a difficult topic for a lot of people. That could possibly be addressed by having doctors discuss it with people, and their concerns would be addressed. And so according to Freya Sakala, some people also fear committing because there's like a fear that if you commit to being an organ donor, then if you happen to go to the hospital for some kind of treatment, you receive a lesser care, so that your organs can be used, but that's not true. Doctors and nurses are interested only in preserving the lives of those that they're entrusted with. And according to the Gift of Life donor program, an individual must be in a hospital on a ventilator and pronounced brain dead in order to donate organs. And the Gift of Life donor programs are not notified until life-saving efforts have failed. And so the transplant team's not even notified by Gift of Life until permission has been given by the deceased family. And some people also fear that this process would affect their ability to have an open casket funeral. That's not true. The body is respected throughout the entire process, and that's still quite possible. And then religious concerns are also an issue for some people. Some people don't know if that's against their religion or not. And according to a study by Zeynep Bugur about the unwillingness of organ donation in Turkey, the vast majority of respondents marked that they were unwilling to donate because they didn't understand their religion's response or stance on it. And many religions encourage acts of generosity, and that's exactly what donation would be. Saving lives is a great act, and many religions would approve of that. And so, that was many of the common fears and myths associated with organ donation. And so in conclusion, there's not enough donors to meet the needs of the waiting list for organ donation. It means that people die every day. And it's important that the number of those donors grows if that need's ever going to be fulfilled. And I hope now that you guys kind of understand some of that, some of you might consider that.